Today, Lego feels almost impossible to destroy. Its colorful bricks fill children's bedrooms, collector displays, classrooms, and theme parks across the world. Every year, billions of pieces leave its factories, finding their way into homes across nearly every continent. Parents trust the brand. Children instantly recognize it. Even adults who haven't touched a Lego brick in decades can still remember the satisfying click of two pieces locking perfectly together. From the outside, it looks like one of those rare companies that always knew exactly what it was doing. But appearances can be dangerously misleading. Because just over 20 years ago, there was a very different conversation happening behind closed doors. Financial analysts questioned whether the company could survive. Executives faced decisions that would determine whether a family business built over generations would disappear forever. For the first time in its history, Lego wasn't trying to become bigger. It was simply trying to stay alive. That raises a question most people never ask. If Lego had already created one of the world's most recognizable products, how could it possibly come so close to collapse? The common explanation is surprisingly simple. Most people believe Lego became successful because it invented an ingenious plastic brick. It's an appealing story, one brilliant invention, one revolutionary product, one company that changed the toy industry forever. Except history rarely works that way. Remarkable inventions fail all the time. Entire industries are filled with products that were technically superior but commercially forgotten. A great idea might open a door, but it rarely guarantees that a company will survive for nearly a century. So perhaps the brick was never the real story. Perhaps the question isn't how Lego invented a better toy. Perhaps the real mystery is how it repeatedly made the right decisions when almost every circumstance suggested the company should fail. To understand that, we have to travel back long before colorful bricks, famous minifigures, or billion-dollar franchises. Back to a small town in central Denmark called Billund. A place that, in the early 20th century, was known not for toys, but for farms, workshops, and harsh winters. There, in 1916, a carpenter named Ole Kirk Christiansen purchased a modest woodworking shop. His business was simple. He built furniture for local families, producing wardrobes, tables, and household items with the precision expected from a skilled craftsman. There was nothing to suggest that this quiet workshop would one day become the birthplace of one of the world's most influential brands. Then the world changed. The Great Depression swept across Europe, devastating local economies and destroying consumer demand. Furniture, once considered a stable trade, suddenly became a luxury many families could no longer afford. Orders disappeared, income collapsed. Like thousands of small business owners, Ole Kirk faced a decision no entrepreneur ever wants to confront. Wait for better days, or reinvent everything before it was too late. He chose reinvention, not because it looked visionary, because survival left him no alternative. That single decision would begin a chain of events that, decades later, would transform a struggling woodworking shop into a global icon. But before Lego could become one of the safest brands in the world, it would first have to survive a disaster that threatened to erase it before its story had truly begun. Reinvention solved one problem, but it created another. Ole Kirk Christiansen had entered the toy business almost by necessity, not because he believed toys represented the future. He was still learning what kind of company he wanted to build. In an industry crowded with inexpensive wooden products, competing on price was almost impossible, so he searched for something that competitors could not easily copy. His answer was quality. While many manufacturers cut corners to survive difficult economic times, Ole Kirk insisted that every toy leaving his workshop should be built to the highest possible standard. It was an expensive philosophy for a small company struggling to stay afloat, but he believed reputation would outlast short-term savings. Years later, that belief would be summarized in a phrase that became part of Lego's identity: "Only the best is good enough." It sounded like an ideal. Soon, it would become a necessity. In 1934, the growing business adopted a new name. Lego, derived from the Danish words leg godt, meaning play well. It was short, memorable, and optimistic. reflecting an ambition that extended beyond selling wooden toys. Without realizing it, Ole Kirk had created a name that would eventually become one of the most recognized brands in the world. But a name alone could not guarantee survival. Just as the company began finding stability, disaster struck. In 1942, a fire tore through the factory in Billund, destroying much of the workshop that Ole Kirk had spent years building. Machinery, inventory, and years of work disappeared in a matter of hours. For many small businesses, such a loss would have marked the end. Insurance was limited, resources were scarce, and Europe was still living through the uncertainty of the Second World War. Everything pointed toward surrender. Instead, Ole Kirk made another remarkable decision. He rebuilt. Not because rebuilding was easy, because abandoning the company was never considered an option. Rebuilding did more than restore a factory. It established a pattern that would repeat throughout Lego's history. Every major crisis forced the company to reinvent itself instead of defending the past. That lesson would prove far more valuable than the factory itself. Ironically, that future was already beginning to appear in a form many people dismissed. Plastic. In the mid-1940s, plastic toys carried a poor reputation. Wood represented craftsmanship. Plastic represented something cheap, artificial, and disposable. Most established toy manufacturers saw little reason to abandon materials that customers already trusted. Yet Ole Kirk and his son, Gottfried, saw something others failed to notice. Plastic could be molded with extraordinary precision. Unlike wood, every piece could be manufactured to nearly identical specifications. If that precision could be mastered, entirely new kinds of toys might become possible. The opportunity was enormous. So was the risk. The machinery required for plastic injection molding demanded an investment that seemed almost reckless for a company that had only recently rebuilt after catastrophe. If customers rejected plastic toys, Lego could lose far more than money. It could lose its future. Most competitors laughed at the idea. Few realized they were witnessing the beginning of a transformation that would eventually redefine not only Lego, but the entire toy industry. The question was no longer whether plastic could replace wood. The question was whether Lego could build something with plastic that nobody else had imagined before. When Lego invested in plastic, the company wasn't chasing a revolutionary product, it was chasing precision. Plastic injection molding offered something wood never could. The possibility of producing thousands of identical pieces, each manufactured to microscopic tolerances. At first, that advantage seemed purely technical. Few imagined it would eventually become the foundation of an entirely new business model. The first plastic building bricks appeared in the late 1940s. They were inspired by an existing British design known as the Kittycraft self-locking building bricks. Lego legally acquired the rights after the inventor's death, but the early versions were far from perfect. Their grip was weak, structures came apart easily, and the experience rarely matched the promise. If the company had stopped there, history would probably have forgotten those plastic bricks as just another failed experiment. Instead, Lego asked a different question. Not how to make a better toy, but how to make a better system. That shift in thinking came largely from Ole Kirk's son, Ole Kirk Christiansen. While his father had built the company through craftsmanship, Gottfried began seeing something much bigger. He believed children shouldn't buy isolated toys that lost their value after a few days. Every new purchase should expand the possibilities of every previous purchase. One small set should connect with another, and another after that. Instead of selling individual products, Lego could build a system where every new purchase increased the value of every previous purchase. Growth would no longer depend only on attracting new customers. Existing customers would continuously create more value from the collections they already owned. In 1955, that philosophy received a name: the system of play. It sounded simple. In reality, it changed everything. For most toy companies, every sale ended when the customer left the store. For Lego, every sale became an invitation to make the next one more valuable. A child who owned 50 bricks wanted 100. A child with one castle imagined building an entire city. Each new set wasn't replacing the previous one, it was multiplying its possibilities. The brick itself became only the interface. The real innovation was compatibility. 3 years later, in 1958, Lego perfected the design by adding the internal tube structure still found inside every modern brick. That engineering improvement dramatically increased clutch power, allowing models to remain stable while still being easy to separate. The company patented the design, creating one of the most recognizable products ever manufactured. The timing was bittersweet. Only months after securing the patent, Ole Kirk Christiansen died. The founder who had rebuilt after disaster and gambled on plastic would never witness the global empire his decisions had made possible. Leadership now rested entirely with Gottfried, who faced an even greater challenge than inventing a remarkable product. He had to prove that an entire company could be built around a single idea. And for a while, it looked as though he was right. Growth accelerated, new markets opened, Lego's future seemed brighter than ever. Success had solved almost every problem Lego had ever faced. Quietly, it was creating an entirely new one. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Gottfried's vision seemed almost impossible to challenge. Lego spread far beyond Denmark. New factories appeared across Europe. Distribution networks expanded into new continents. What had begun as a small workshop in Billund was becoming a global manufacturing machine. In 1968, the company opened the first Legoland park in Billund, proving that its identity could extend beyond toys into experiences. 10 years later came another milestone, the modern Lego minifigure. With its movable arms, legs, and instantly recognizable smile, it gave children something they had never truly possessed before, not just bricks to build structures, but characters to inhabit them. Entire worlds could now be imagined, one piece at a time. By the 1980s, Lego had become far more than a toy manufacturer. Parents viewed its products as educational. Teachers saw them as tools for creativity and problem-solving. Children saw endless possibilities. The company's reputation grew stronger even as electronic toys and video games began competing for children's attention. Then, in 1988, another event arrived that many believed would permanently weaken Lego. The patent protecting its iconic brick expired. Competitors wasted no time. Companies began producing compatible building bricks, often selling them at lower prices. On paper, Lego's greatest competitive advantage had disappeared overnight. But something unexpected happened. Customers kept buying Lego. The company discovered that its true strength had never been legal protection. Families weren't paying for plastic bricks. They were buying certainty. Every new Lego set fit perfectly with the ones already sitting in a child's bedroom. Every purchase became more valuable than the last. By the time the patent expired, competitors could copy the brick, but they couldn't copy decades of trust, compatibility, and habit. The patent had protected the design. The brand now protected the business. It was an extraordinary victory. Unfortunately, victories can be just as dangerous as failures. During the 1990s, Lego entered one of the most ambitious periods in its history. Confident in its global reputation, leadership pursued expansion on nearly every front. New product themes appeared constantly. The company invested in clothing, books, software, educational products, publishing, television projects, and increasingly complex business initiatives. Theme parks expanded. Video games multiplied. Every year seemed to bring another opportunity that appeared too promising to ignore. Individually, many of these ideas made sense. Collectively, they created something far more dangerous. Complexity. Thousands of new products meant thousands of new decisions. Warehouses slowly filled with inventory that wasn't selling. Designers competed for factory capacity. Sales forecasts became increasingly unreliable. Every additional product made manufacturing, logistics, and planning just a little more complicated. Individually, none of these problems seemed fatal. Together, they became something far more dangerous. Complexity. Not the kind customers could see on store shelves. The kind that silently spreads through an organization. Every new product required new molds, new suppliers, new forecasts, new production schedules, new marketing campaigns, new warehouse space, new decisions. And with every new decision, the system became a little harder to control. costs didn't explode overnight. They accumulated. Quietly. Almost invisibly. Until complexity itself became one of Lego's largest expenses. The irony was almost impossible to ignore. The company that had conquered the world by creating one beautifully simple system was now being crushed by one it had created itself. From the outside, nothing seemed wrong. Children still loved Lego. Parents still trusted the brand. Store shelves were full. The logo had never been stronger, but inside the company, a different story was unfolding. Every department was working harder, yet the business was becoming weaker. Because great companies rarely collapse when customers stop believing in them. They collapse when they stop understanding themselves. And that was exactly what was happening. Lego's greatest threat had never been cheaper competitors. It had never been copycat bricks. It had never been changing technology. Its greatest enemy was the slow abandonment of the very philosophy that had made the company extraordinary in the first place. Sometimes, businesses don't fail because they lose their greatest strength. They fail because they slowly forget what that strength was. And if there's one lesson hidden inside Lego's darkest chapter, it's that the most dangerous decisions are rarely the dramatic ones. They're the small compromises that seem harmless, until one day they become the system itself. This is hidden ledger. Because behind every great company, there's always a mechanism nobody notices, until it almost destroys everything.